Hello and welcome. As usual, we'll give folks just a few minutes to get joined onto the Zoom if they're doing so. So we'll get started in just a few minutes. I call this meeting of the South Obispo School Board, this business meeting, to order. We will start with our land acknowledgement, and I will turn to Director Jackson for that.
Thank you. South Whidbey School District acknowledges that we live and work on the lands of the Coast Salish people, the Snohomish people, people from the tribes of the Stillaguamish, Suquamish, and collectively the Tulalip tribes. Part of my hope for this evening is to share with you a poem by an Indigenous author, not an Indigenous author from this region, but one who is native to this continent and from Central America. She lives in Texas, and I personally found her words moving. And so, as it is Indigenous Heritage Month, I would like to Native American Heritage Month. I would like to read to you from this Native American author's work. Her name is Idika Chilome. She is a queer Indigenous mestiza cultural worker descended from people of the Zacateco and Lenca from El Salvador and Mexico. The poem is called The Archive of Our Relation. I admit the mourning is constant, the names, the words, the whispers, colors and textures that were lost, persecuted, poisoned, disinherited, extracted, cut down, shaved, kidnapped, unclaimed and forgotten, an endless war. I too report my silence has not saved me, yet running water calls spirits, hidden in me carefully, waiting for me to quiet the mind, so they may wake me right on time to witness the great expanse, a dance so tender it gently wakes the sun. In gratitude, the sun rises, offers its power so that we may see all that has been done, all that is yet to come. In humility and courage, I rise, offer my power so that I may see all that has been done, and you who has yet to become. Tumul Sinu, may the sun always shine on you, a prayer weaved by the most precious parts of me, a breath, the most potent offering to our becoming. I report the water, the earth, the seeds, and the grace of a dancing sky remain a pure reflection, the wealth of our inheritance, the heart of our connection, the archive of our relation, if we so choose to co-conspire, to remember. Agua es vida, water is life. We are the water, and remembering has offered us our lives. Love letters bloomed beautiful in anticipation of you. Travel guides to the ancient futures that are due. Living memory of gestation and labor, humble testimonies conspired in your favor. You see, more than hope, we hold a deep knowing. All creation moves in circle. All that was once dead is reborn. The breaking of the seed, a necessary violence. Forgiveness, a necessary blooming. Resistance, a necessary rooting. Rebuilding, a defining act of courage. Letting go, a radical act of love. I too agree with trees. I do not shy away from the darkness, nor do I fear the wind. I remember the water and take root in the memory of you, the living archive of relation, a sweet and sacred confirmation that we are still alive. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Jackson, particularly for sharing that Native American work during Native American Heritage Month. This is a business meeting. We'll be discussing exactly what that means during our business meeting. But in general, we have one public comment period, at which point folks can make one comment up to 5 minutes. It will generally not be responded to, but we will listen and hear and take it into mind going forward. I do want to note as we are getting this meeting started, that South Whitby has voted to confirm and fund the South Whitby School District School Bond. And I want to thank the community for providing us, this district, with the funds to make our schools places that our students and staff can be proud of. We'll move on immediately to the agenda and minutes. Are there any objections to approving the agenda and minutes as presented? Hearing none, the agenda and minutes are approved as presented. Are there any objections to approving the consent agenda as presented? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved as presented, which is fantastic. 3 new clubs and 2 trips for the middle school and high school jazz band. And we'll move straight on into public comment. We'll start with those here in the room and then move on to any comments that may be on Zoom. If you are on Zoom and would like to make a comment, please use the Q&A function to enter your name and general location, just the community that you live in. Just enter that right away and then start typing your comment just so that we know that you have a comment incoming. Mrs. Macaro, is there anyone signed up here? Okay. And you've been here before, but have most people here, but at the start, could you just note your name and location? Thank you.
Charlene Davenport, Clinton, Washington. I wrote a letter to the editor of the Record a couple of weeks ago. Nothing's been published, but I thought I would take a couple of paragraphs from that letter and read it to you so that it would be on some sort of public forum, public recording. So I'll read the 2 paragraphs and then I have another paragraph to add. Over the last couple of years, I've seen some targeting directed at our South Whitby School Board members, superintendent, principals, teachers, and other administrative staff in print and at public school board meetings. I'd like to remind all of us that these people are public servants. We, the public, may not agree with certain decisions or procedures being followed, but they deserve our courtesy and respect. They serve with no pay for board members, or like the superintendent and other administrators, have taken on vacant position responsibilities, thus giving themselves pay cuts to save the district money. Most of them definitely work more than 40 hours a week and have done so with no complaints for a long time. They are public servant heroes, like our military, police, and firefighters. And those were the 2 paragraphs in the letter. And I'd like to add, I think we all need to thank a public school employee or school board member for their service. To all of you in this room and all district employees, you teach and lead our children to become the future leaders of their communities, state, and country, as evidenced by these 2 young adults sitting beside you. Thank you to all employees of the district for your dedication to public school education. You are heroes to me and to many others in our community. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Andy Gabeline, Freeland. I want to start with just saying I'm not going anywhere. I've got 6 more years. I've got a amazing 12-year-old. He's going to be 13 here in a couple weeks. That's kind of scary. I want to follow up from last meeting. I went back, listened to parts of the meeting I wasn't able to attend. And I wanted to go over just a few elements and then just follow back up with some frustrations I'm having in regards to that. You had Jane Marie come and speak. She had some amazing things to share, amazing words, a lot of knowledge, a lot of knowledge. Some of the things that stood out to me from the get-go, though, was this policy that she was speaking on was something that was important for you guys to clarify expectations on how people will interact at meetings. What I liked that she said was the concept was to encourage community engagement, the manner in which we go about discussing or communicating, professional communication and its standards and its policy. Something I kind of felt a little odd was Andrea pointed out that the respecting the board was also requiring respecting the community. Because as she listed, it is a two-way street. It doesn't just take speaking, but it also requires listening. One of the first meetings I attended here back when my son was in kindergarten a few years ago, that was when Linda Rasico was on the board, been here a while. And one of the things she kept saying was to the parents, unfortunately, you are uninformed. You do not know what you're saying. You are uninformed. I wish I would have counted how many times she said that statement that night. And I'm one of those individuals, I will wait. I really don't like to be interrupted, and therefore I won't interrupt other people. But I finally stood up and I said, I'm sorry, you really need to stop saying that statement, because most of these people in this room are parents, which means they're probably more aware of what goes on in their child's classroom than you are. Not to say that she isn't aware, but just to put out a comparison and to look down at people as if they didn't know something, I found kind of insulting. So I like that Jan Marie kind of pointed out that listening is important. Making decisions based off of what you hear, which requires you to listen. Reflecting back, the conversation, I think what you're saying is, and repeat back. The community members deserve to know that their time is of value when they come and share and speak, because we're here. We're, like the young lady just said, we're not getting paid either. We're here. I've been here since day one and I ain't going anywhere. But the biggest thing is you're demonstrating to your community that you're responsible leaders. And you're also showing them how to interact with you and showing that their time is of worth and their thoughts and opinions are valued. And that's huge. Unfortunately, after the last meeting, I was really frustrated. And I thought, what am I missing? What am I doing wrong? I come, I ask a question. Unfortunately, most of the time I get cut off. I'm asking a question because I haven't got the answer anywhere else. Mr. Pullman just got back to me today, which is great, thrilled. But it shouldn't have taken since September for that to happen. And in past meetings, I have stopped some of you and said, and this is exactly why people don't come to the meetings, because you respond very harshly, like this is a wall. So I really hope, after listening to Jane Marie and the things she had to say, that you will take the time and remember that two-way street. Following up with that, I listened to your comments in regards to when are parents supposed to come and ask their questions? When are we supposed to voice concerns? Q&As came up, great idea. Few things I didn't like was the terms, people get confused, people don't understand. We're not idiots. We're just parents with concerns and questions. Y'all had a special meeting in September. We had a change in location for a grade. We had a change in bell schedules, and we had a change in transportation. Those are three major things. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only parent that came here going, is this working? I have concerns. Instead, I was, no, we have a special workshop to work on us. We don't have time. And I think one of the board members said, we have busy lives. We can't do Q&A. We all have busy lives. I'm not going to compare mine. I'm not going to compare yours, but you need to show us that our time is of value and make it a two-way street and respect our time and us as individually. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Wendy. No one else? I'm going to take a look on Zoom. We have no one who's put in a Q&A yet. If you are on the Zoom and would like to make a comment, now is the time to enter your name and location in the Q&A and hit enter, just so that we know that you have something coming. Otherwise, we'll move on to our other business for the evening. Okay, I believe that does it for public comment. We'll move on to new business. Our first point of new business is Memorandum 2324-16. Approval of the update to Southerby School District Policy 1400, meeting conduct, order of business, and quorum meetings. This was just adding in description of the formats. That's the only change that I made on this. I shared it with you all earlier, and it's been up on the agenda. So hopefully folks have gotten a chance to look at this. The only change is further down, scrolled further down, describing the 4 types of common meetings. And to, I think it was Joe's point, sorry, Director Greenherron's point, making sure that we don't box ourselves in. I was sure to say other formats may be used for special meetings, emergency meetings, or at the board's discretion. I know that you had a couple of comments you wanted to make on this. Shall we start discussion there?
Thank you. Really just sort of more of a clerical comment is that towards the beginning of the policy, we refer to our meetings, business meetings, like the one we're having right now, as regular meetings. And then in this change in red, we referred to them as business meetings, which I believe we all would recognize as the term that we would use for a meeting like this. And so I just want to make sure that while this change does introduce clarity, we're calling them what we call them. There's also some confusion introduced because now in one policy, we're calling the same type of meeting by 2 different things. So I would add a friendly amendment, if possible, to standardize on one type of terminology for this type of meeting.
So I hear that. I think that there are actually two different terms. I think regular meeting is our second meeting of the month. We can have business meetings at other times also. Because, for instance, next month we'll have one meeting because it's December and there's the break and all that. And that will be both a workshop and a business meeting. So that's why I use the others, but I'm happy to alter it if folks would like to.
Is there any professional guidance around regular versus business? Maybe you had some insight, Dr. Moshe?
So I can see Joe's point. You have some contradiction here because in that very first paragraph, it refers to a regular meeting, a special meeting, or an emergency meeting. And you have a regular meeting. One is a workshop, one is a business meeting. They're regularly scheduled on the calendar twice a month. So I think the clarity, I accept the point of you need some clarity around it could be a workshop or a business meeting, but they're regularly scheduled meetings as opposed to a special or emergency scheduled meeting.
So could we just add under regular meetings are held at 6:30 p.m. on the second and fourth Wednesday of the month. Continue, right? And then add in one meeting is typically a workshop and one meeting is typically a business meeting.
An alternate possibility might be to add in the first paragraph under meeting conduct, order of business, and quorum, after the phrase regular meetings, put in parentheses business and or workshop, so that people already have a definition of regular meeting by the time they reach the regular meeting subheader.
And the only one that is, okay, so just back to the beginning, the board is required to meet 4 times a year. This board meets for a business meeting once a month. And most months you have a workshop. So I do think that, to your point, if you just put it in parentheses, business or workshop, I also think, I I think might want to add the word typically. Regular meetings are typically held because you have some alternation of dates. And it's interesting because this is the language that's been there,
Yeah.
right? And so,
Yeah, that's why it's so good we're bringing up this one again, because there are things, and I admit I only focused on the adding the formats, but yeah, adding typically held and second and fourth Wednesday,
Yeah.
I think, and you suggested a parenthetical in that first paragraph also.
Yes, and I might say business meeting and or workshop to leave us the flexibility to have one, the other, or both.
And then
you-
Brooke, in your areas that you added,
Mhm.
you have board workshops are typically the first board meeting of the month.
Mhm.
And I think there's an opportunity to clarify the language of board workshops are typically the second week of the month.
Hmm.
Because otherwise I think it's too close of language.
you also have a published calendar.
Mhm.
So board workshops are typically held the second week of each month, and then
Mhm.
under business meetings are
Typically
typically
held
held
the fourth
the
week of
fourth
the month.
week of each month.
Christy did some modifying on the language for you before you make a motion.
Since we know those are typically on Wednesdays, should we add that, typically the second Wednesday of the month rather than second meeting of the month? Or
So that second paragraph says it, regular meetings are typically held on the second and fourth Wednesday.
Right.
oh,
of
there
each
it is.
month.
Okay,
Yeah.
I see it.
Up much higher in the, but
Yeah.
there is the point that it could be not the second week, but the second Wednesday of each month down in the meeting
Yeah.
format section.
Yep, that's what I was talking
Yep.
about, just to keep the language
Oh, okay.
consistent
Yep.
throughout.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got these business meetings and our workshops, typically second and. Could you scroll down a little bit? Down to the other section. And then board workshops are typically held the second Wednesday. Yep. Business meetings are typically held the fourth Wednesday. Yeah. So we'll have to get a very precisely worded motion on this one.
Do we want the level of specificity to say that, because at the top we do mention second and fourth Wednesdays. And I imagine that any schedule changes would be communicated to the public in a clear and timely manner. And I just wonder if we really want the level of specificity that we're getting into here around scheduling of board workshops and business meetings in this meeting format section. It feels like it's a bit in the weeds.
I had put it in there so it was easy for people to find what to expect, but I certainly see the point of not wanting to get too in-depth in
Yeah,
policy.
I'd like to continue to direct the public to our calendar for knowing what to expect, since that'll be full of the freshest and most accurate information.
The second paragraph in our regular meetings at the top also speaks to how meetings will change and if they change,
Yep.
What notice will be given and what time. So that, again, kind of distills down into this is our norm. And then this is what happens in the instance of an emergency or a change in policy or a change in meeting time.
So that would then be your suggestion, Marnie, would then be to just make it read down in the meeting format section. Board workshops are opportunities for the board to discuss particular subjects. And for business meetings are opportunities for the board to complete.
Yes. I also think we might want to add that board retreats are opportunities for the board to discuss board business together and or experience professional development. Since retreats are
Mhm.
often coincidental with training.
board retreats or opportunities or undertake professional development? Engage in, that's better. I very much like that to clarify the other opportunities there. Anything from our student reps?
I think it looks good. I like the clarification. So when students look at this, they also know when meetings are and what the different types are.
Yeah, I like the changes to it. It makes it a lot more easy to read and has a lot of good clarity.
So we have a motion on the floor to approve it as is. So we'll need a very specific amendment motion to make these changes.
I opened the can of worms, so I will attempt to make this. I move we add in the first paragraph, after the words regular meetings, in parentheses, business meetings and/or workshops. In the second paragraph, after regular meetings are, the word typically, and after the words on the, adding the two words second and. And finally, in the second paragraph under meeting formats, at the end of the first sentence, to add or engage in professional development.
And may
Did I
I
miss one?
add additional bonus amendments to your recommended amendments?
We have an amendment, or we have a motion now. You may make a motion to amend that motion.
All right, I move to amend that motion by accepting the changes as proposed and additionally in the paragraph under meeting formats beginning board workshops, have the first sentence read, board workshops are opportunities for the board to discuss particular subjects with each other, staff, students, and members of the community. And in the paragraph beginning business meetings, have the first sentence read, business meetings are opportunities for the board to complete its business in public.
Okay, we have two amendments on the floor. The first one is the alteration to the original amendment. Is there any discussion about this? Okay, all those in favor of approving the amendment to the original amendment to clarify the paragraphs regarding board workshops and business meetings, please say aye.
Aye.
Our students,
Aye.
Aye.
thank you. I got that backwards. I was worried about the order of precedence. I apologize for that. Okay, so that amendment has now been approved. So we now have one amendment, one motion for an amendment, which has itself been changed. So all those in favor, or we'll go for advisory votes first. I'm going to state what it is first, just so we're all clear. It is an amendment to alter what is up here to include business meetings and or workshops in the first paragraph. Typically and second and in the regular meetings paragraph. And then adding engage in professional development under board retreats and altering the first sentence of board workshops and business meetings paragraphs to remove the unnecessary details. Student reps, advisory votes,
Aye.
please.
Aye.
Thank you. All those in favor of approving this amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're back to the original motion as amended. Since I've just restated each of them twice, I'm going to ask for advisory votes on approving the memorandum as amended.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All those in favor of approving the memorandum as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Let me get back to this so that I can then say memorandum 2324-16, approval of the update to South Louis School District Policy 1400, meeting conduct, order of business, and quorum meetings has been approved as amended. Memorandum 2324-17, approval of the update to South Louis School District Policy 3241, student discipline. You want to take? lead on this discussion?
Yeah, as discussed in our previous workshop, there's a number of changes throughout this document or throughout this policy. To summarize, there's some that are rather inconsequential, like adding guardians, removing some empty blank space. There's some changes that I would summarize as putting the wording in this policy more in alignment with our culture of care and restorative justice initiatives. And then further down, there's some more substantive changes about the superintendent having the ultimate responsibility to ensure that professional development is occurring and that it meets certain criteria about positive discipline and building staff capacity to engage in the current best practices in discipline. There is, in addition to noting that the procedure associated with this policy outlines a grievance and appeal process that parents and guardians can go through. And then lastly, it adds a data reporting, a yearly data reporting out at the data summit that the superintendent or a delegate will provide discipline data for the board and the public.
Okay, any questions, comments, discussion on this one? Okay, could we have advisory votes from our student representatives on this?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. All those in favor of approving this memorandum, please say, or all those in favor of approving memorandum 2324-17, please say aye.
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 Memorandum 2324-17, approval of the update to South Whidbey School District Policy 3241, student discipline has been approved. We will move out of our new business into reports. I expect this to be a full segment since we did get to go into the WASDA, Washington State School Directors Association conference, but we'll start with Mr. Poolman with the financial and enrollment report.
Yeah, good evening. This will be we'll start with our enrollment report as of November 1st. So it's the first 3 months of the school year. Just a second, I have to move something. Maybe I'll just look at the screen. It's easier. Okay, so we had budgeted 1,106 FTE for our basic education and our alternative learning environment program. We're currently at 1,105.59, so we're close to that. Special education is up slightly. Our vocational program is down slightly, though normally a second semester bumps that up. We are looking, when we look at budget numbers, year-long numbers, the September through June averages. So that's kind of a summary of where we are. This is just a look at it by buildings. And what I want to point out is look at K5, you'll see that we have about 427 FTE as our average right now. We budget 422. We are about 4.7 FTE above our budget. But when we look at that, it's important where those students are, what grades they belong in, because we have something called K3 compliance. So even though we have 1,106 FTE for students, which matches our funding number, the funding formula deviates from that total. It won't pay us the same based on this K3 compliance. And what that basically means is that for every 17 kids we have at the elementary school, we have one certificated staff member who is a classroom teacher or a specialist, such as a PE, art, music, etc. So if we look at this in the K3 grades, we are about 7.75 students above our budget. But in the ALE, we're 4.33 down. ALE is not part of the K3 compliance. So what that means is that it's only a basic ed number, which means we are 12 students higher than we had budgeted in the K3. That changes that K3 compliance. And what that means is that we potentially wouldn't collect funds from the state because we have a ratio that is higher than the 17-1, so say 17.8. And the reason I mention this is it really goes back to that whole funding formula. It has all these bits and pieces that affect how much money you get. Well, unless we make an adjustment to this, we will receive roughly 95,000 fewer dollars from the state even though we have the 1,106 kids in there, just because of the way the formula works. So as a district, we will be adding another teacher at that K3 level starting in January. And Principal Richards has some great ideas about how that's going to help student achievement. But just when you see the fact that we're hiring another teacher, this is why we're doing it. We can either not collect the funds, or we can collect funds and add a staff member for the same cost, which makes sense to add that staff member. So just part of that formula, when we start looking at how schools are funded, it's just not that you get $10,000 or whatever the number is times the number of students. There's all these pieces in there that have these variables in it that you have to pay attention to. And this is one of those is at K3. So I just wanted to mention that to you. We could have a bunch of kids move from basic ed into ALE, and then that compliance ratio would change again, and we'd be below 17. So it's that influx and exflow of kids into different programs has that adjustment to be made. And then this is the enrollment by grades, and you can see any changes that occur during the first 3 months. It's relatively slight. You don't see a lot of changes between September, October, and November. Normally, changes start happening mid-year and later in the year. And if you have questions about any of these, just feel free to stop me. And this is just a monthly comparison to previous years. And you can see that the red bar graph for this year is substantially different than previous years. And it's a pattern that we've been seeing for a while. And this is what it looks like if you look at it in a different format, but it's the same thing. The importance of this is trying to project where we think enrollment will be for the year. It's something that we need to be aware of. What's the pattern? This year, it's very flat. We're at about 1106, 1105, almost 1106. So it hasn't changed much. Normally, prior to other years, you would see a slight influx in October and November, and start dropping at the last year. We actually just went up. It was a different pattern. So each year is a little bit different, but the real difference here is you can see that, from 1325 to about 1106 over time, that consistent change that we see. Moving into the financials, this is through October, which is our second fiscal month. We start with September and go through August. It's 16.67% of the year. Our funding revenue so far is about 3.9 million. Our expenditures 3.45 million. You can't see the revenue because it's almost identical to the previous years. It's pretty typical pattern that you see. The expenditures were lower in September, but higher in October, but overall they are lower than they were last year. And this is just a look at what the revenue and expenditure looks like as a pattern. And it's the reason we have fund balance, because in a lot of these months, the expenditure is greater than the revenue. You have a couple months in there where you get your levy collections in October and April that you feel big peaks, but otherwise it bounces back and forth. But if you look at our revenue for October, it's 2.4 million. And our expenses in October is about 1.9 million. So it gives you a little bit of difference. But if you look at the revenue and expenditures for the previous year, you can see that revenue is very similar, but expenditures are down slightly. And that's because of the process we went through in the spring with the budget and the reductions we did. So looking at revenue and expenditures, it gives you that 3.9 million, 3.4 million with a current fund balance of 5.6 million. And again, during the months that we collect the levy collections, you're going to see those higher fund balances because we get the big cash, about half of the levy collection in October and the other half in the spring. So if we add encumbrances, which are those costs we know we have, which is basically contracts at this point and a few things that we have ordered but not received. The MSOC, which is material supplies and other costs, everything that's not payroll related is about 44% of its budget. Payroll with everything encumbered is about 98%. Things that aren't encumbered are going to be additional time for sick leave and the different leaves that people have because we don't encumber those. We don't know those in advance, but we're at about 89% of budget with everything to date. Just to look at expenditures by our main categories with kind of a 6-year look back to see how those have changed. And the top is certificated salaries, and then classified salaries, the employee benefits. You can see that one has dropped down. Again, that's a direct correlation to the reduction in retirement rates that we have to pay to the state. It dropped about 5%. It isn't that we have less benefits. It's just that that particular one is less expensive. It's 10% instead of 15% for TERS. And then supplies, services, and travel. So it gives you an idea. It's not that different. You know, we're still in that same range, but you'd see that is about in 18-19 is about 3.3 million with escalation and costs and the big jumps we've seen in inflation. You would expect that would be much higher than the 3.4 million. But again, as our enrollment gets smaller, we collect less money, we have to make adjustments. And you can see where those adjustments, you know, are made over time.
Well, and the services timeline here gives an ample demonstration of what you were saying. I think it was last month, it might have been the month before, about the increase in insurance rates and other things that we don't have control over, but are still going up and are not being funded as rising that quickly by the state. So thank you for laying that out again.
Yeah, you are absolutely correct in that. Services is not an area that we have much control over. Utilities, insurance, all those type things that, you know, will continue to increase.
The supplies are dramatically less, which we also are aware of as our teachers.
Balance sheet, just a look at assets, liabilities, and the ending fund balance by each of the accounts that we do have in there. And you can see that our assets are about 7.2 million, our liabilities about 1.6, and that gives us that $5.6 million fund balance difference. And just, you know, where those things fall. Fund balance, again, looking at the same type of pattern. We started a little higher this year than we did last year, but we have planned to spend that down over time. Property taxes, local revenue, which is school generated, our state income, and federal special purpose income, both are based on enrollment numbers. And then the federal grants, you see this year, we're seeing a big reduction in federal grants. And a lot of that is the ESSER funds that have been spent in previous years and are now gone. But it gives you an idea of how our funding has changed, or, you know, positively or negatively. And in most cases, anything that's tied to enrollment, it's actually gone down over the last 5 years due to the number of students that we now have compared to where we were at one time. Again, just to look at those same categories in a graph form, you can see that the majority of our funds are invested in people. That's the biggest investment that we do have in this district is the staff that we have that are supporting our children. The other 4 funds, the capital projects fund, we received about 775,000 of the 2.2 million so year to date through October. So that gives us an ending fund balance about 2.9 million. There are projects, you know, in place, but we still have a good balance for things that we can work on here. Debt service doesn't have any payment due until December. So at this point, nothing has been transferred in to take care of that. ASB, it's almost $110,000. So that has grown over time. Transportation Vehicle Fund, still waiting for the electric school bus. We think it's coming in December, but again, that'll be a $400,000 cost when it actually shows up. And then the Private Purpose Trust Fund, which is money dedicated for scholarships, has that, you know, core balance that we can't spend, so it's always going to be there.
And capital funds are, the capital projects is going up because you've got things planned and haven't been able to schedule them, or are waiting for something specific to act on? Or
it's a little of both. A lot of it has gone up because of during COVID, a lot of projects didn't get acted on. You know, it's really difficult to get people in to do work during that time. And we've had a transition in leadership in that facilities department. And so that kind of slowed down some of the projects that we normally would be doing. So I would expect to see a ramp up in activity to start spending those funds. Technology spends about half of it on an annual basis. It's the capital projects piece that hasn't been seeing a lot of activity in the last couple of years. So, and we received most of the reimbursements from the FEMA project of the community center. So that has also helped, reimburse this fund. Because we had planned on keeping a balance in there while we were going through that process, because the reimbursement with the military arm of the federal government has been really slow. It's like 9 months sometimes every time we put an invoice in. So we've had to make sure that we've had funds to cover that during that time also.
I just wanted to check in on that because I know that that a major community concern is maintenance and upkeep. And I just wanted to, I figured I knew the answer, but I wanted to hear it and give you the opportunity to share it. So thank
Yeah,
you.
it's basically the conditions that we're in, and we're coming out of that now. And it's the ability to get people to actually do some work. It's taking longer than it has in the past to, it's a struggle sometimes to find people that aren't busy right now. So,
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Pullman. We'll move on to the student report. I do want to note that we had talked last time about moving that up to the presentations period, but since last Thursday, or the leadership meeting is usually on Thursday, and last Thursday was Thanksgiving, we didn't get a chance to talk. So we didn't get a chance to change that. We'll make sure it gets changed for next month. I'll turn it over to y'all.
Thank you. Let's start with high school. A lot of high school students are really excited about the bond, especially the younger ones that are going to see kind of the first little era of the bond. They're really excited. Fall sports have officially finished their seasons. The boys cross country team qualified for state and they placed 5th, which was really great. Carter was there. Carter was one of the runners that helped place the team, which was really cool. The girls had 3 individual runners and were led by Naomi Atwood, and she placed 12th. So that's also really cool to see because, cross country has like 200 plus runners. So a 12th place finish is great. We had one Falcon swimmer be represented at the state meet, and that was Sean Carr, and she placed 13th in the 100 freestyle, which is also great to see. It's nice that we have some swimmers. Even I know they go over to Kamiak, and that's a long way, so it's nice to see their dedication. The winter sports season started up last week or 2 weeks ago, I believe, with girls and boys basketball, girls and boys wrestling, and winter cheer. And I think the games and the meets are starting to start this week. So that's really fun. Those games are also enjoyable to go to. For clubs, we have 3 new clubs. We have the Snow Sports Club, which hopefully soon, once the mountains start opening up, are going to try to plan kind of a field trip up and go skiing and snowboarding and all that fun stuff. There's a chess club and also a book club. And it's great to see how many new clubs are being started each year, and that students see that they have an opportunity to create clubs if they don't see a club at the school that they resonate with. For our existing clubs, Model UN attended Pac-Man when we attended WASDA, and we had 12 delegates representing various countries and positions. This is a 2-day conference in Seattle with over 1,200 delegates in total from all over the Pacific Northwest into Canada. So it was great to see how many delegates from South Whitby went. In the past, it's been lower numbers, so it's nice to see the club really building up. Spanish Club had a Halloween, we have a picture on the board of the Pac-Man delegates. Spanish Club had a Halloween themed bake sale and also did a sugar skull making up after school. And you can see an example of one of the sugar skulls that was made up on the board, as well as a little picture from that after school activity. And then Queer and Trans Club also had a really successful bake sale. For music, the choir has a concert next Wednesday, and that's going to be their winter concert. And there's a band concert this Friday. So it's fun to see all the little music things that are happening. Carter and I got to attend WASDA, which was really cool. There was 115 student reps to attend. It was great to see how many student reps there were, especially since South Whitby was one of the first to start sending students and also having students in general. I got to attend a lot of really cool breakout sessions and student voice, student representation, and it was good to talk to other schools and other districts about what we're doing and what they're doing and take feedback from them and give them feedback about us.
I learned a lot about how Washington in specifics education system works and how our budgeting works, which was really fun. I also learned about a lot of various different forms of student voice and how they do that. And it was really interesting to see and pretty inspirational with a lot of cool speakers. Okay, now what's going on at the middle school. In the middle school, they just finished up their fall sports with cross country, football, and volleyball seasons ending. Winter sports has started up with boys basketball and girls soccer. I think boys basketball won their first, not one, but had their first home game yesterday. The first quarter assembly also happened with a staff versus volleyball game. The students won. There were also class competitions that highlighted Cougar Pride Awards. There was a canned food drive November through December 7th with a class competition. The sixth period class that collects the most wins a donut party. There's also student-led parent-teacher conferences with a 90% student turnout. The students presented their portfolio of work to their families that include self-reflections from each class. Middle school unified robotics team wins first among several large 1A high schools and competitions in Renton. This is a Special Olympics event that unifies students and promotes inclusion. The middle school also attended the Veterans Day Assembly, which included a performance from the high school choir and speakers from our community. Upcoming events. The middle school ASB is going to the community center tomorrow to help set up the holiday house. Winter Spirit Week called Winterfest. It's the last week before winter break. They have dress up days, bring your own mug, hot cocoa day, where they get hot cocoa, a family portrait station, ugly sweater day, decorating the Cougar Den, an assembly, band performance to school, and social activities to celebrate everyone. The middle school jazz concert is on Friday. The jazz band is also busy delivering points and Yettas that they have sold to support their upcoming travel. All bands 5th through 6th are playing at the winter concert on Tuesday, December 5th. Now to the elementary school. The orchestra is opened with lots of positive feedback. I have heard when I went down there, I heard lots of students at lunch talking about how they were gonna spend their Cougar bucks, and I heard that they really wanted Pokemon cards in the place. Clubs are active throughout the school. One thing I noticed was that there was a garden club, which is planting native plants in the garden out front, which is really nice to see because that's always been kind of empty in my time here. High school buddies have been going down to the elementary school on Tuesdays and hanging out with students, which we've seen really positive feedback from students on that. And the elementary schools hosted the annual Harvest Festival on November 9th, serving food to the students and their families.
Students in the 4th and 5th grade were also able to lead and participate in conferences, which was really well received by everyone. They're having a book fair this week, and when I went down there, they were all really excited to go check out all the cool little trinkets. Sometimes the books get forgotten about and the pens and pencils are what everyone wants, but I think the parents have an opportunity during a movie night to go look for some books, and usually that's when the books are purchased. Speaking of which, there's a family movie night, I believe it's tomorrow, where parents can do some shopping at the book fair and they can bring their whole family and watch a fun movie. The elementary school ASB are sponsoring a very special collective collection drive on behalf of the South Would Be Homeless Coalition. So the students will be collecting items to donate to the Homeless Coalition's Haven Shelter. And it's great to see students at such a young age participating in these initiatives and to support the community and to kind of grow that in the schools and teach students the importance of giving to others. And lastly, Fridays are Spirit Days, so Orcas, be sure to wear blue, white Orca gear and any of your favorite sports teams' outfits. So that's all from our student report this week. Any questions?
Thanks. I have a question. When students have talked about the bond passing, have you heard specific requests for like, oh, now the bonds has passed, can you fix this or that?
It's a lot about the stadium. The stadium is a big thing for the students.
I've heard a lot about the turf and various angles on the turf. I think it's kind of like, it's not a solid, what's it called? The field is not a solid like, oh, everyone wants a turf, everyone wants grass thing. It's kind of like mixed, but I've heard a lot of talk about that mainly. And the siding too. People are really interested in what the school's gonna actually look like.
Thank you.
I'd love to hear and see more clubs being created. I think that that's a fantastic addition to every level of the schools. As I've had the opportunity to help out with the Orca Store, the Harvest Feast, and the book fair, and yes, they love their little toys and things, and it is a struggle to get a second grader to get at least one book. They love it, and it's fantastic that we're able to provide that. Thank you for the report. Okay, we'll move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Moshe.
It's hard to follow the students. I'm glad you're going to move them. So what I wanted to update the board on is, yes, in fact, the bond did pass, and we have a steering committee that has been selected. We have 4 meetings scheduled, the first one being December 13th. 2 of our board members are on that team. That's Brooke and Marnie. And we are working with architects. Dan and I have been meeting with them on Mondays. And now we can actually start to make plans. One of the things that we're putting together is a request for qualifications. I updated the board and our student reps when we talked about this at our retreat. But just to let the board know, we will be putting out that request for qualification at the same time, putting out a job posting to see if there's an individual in the community who may have the qualifications. And those will be due the first week back in January. And then we will set up, based on what we get for qualifications, probably 2 or 3 interviews for the board. So you can select either an owner representative company or individual. The steering committee will start to look at all of the projects. We're going to start to consider what the first priorities are. The board, of course, will hear all of this as we get there. But we don't anticipate actually issuing a bond for payment until June. And I'm optimistic that we can start this summer, but that's just me being optimistic. I have to hear from the experts as to whether or not we can do that, but we do anticipate issuing our first bonds sometime around the end of the school year. I plan to meet with our students for more than just bond discussion, but I was talking to Mr. Patton and Mrs. Phillips about opportunities to meet with middle school and high school students they have advisory leadership meetings on a regular basis. So I will be moving into those rather than try to have a separate student meeting so that can capture more voice that way. That's really all I have right now. The bond has really been first and foremost on my mind so that I can make sure that we're getting into a groove for it. And we put a lot of pieces in place, hoping that that second count was accurate, that we had gone over the threshold. And now that it's official as of yesterday, I've got everything in motion for that. So it's pretty exciting. That's all I had for today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moshe. That I've been having a lot of community questions on timeline also, so that will provide me with information to provide them. Thank you. We'll move on to board member reports. Anyone want to start us off?
I'll go ahead and start a little bit about the WASDA conference that we attended earlier in the month. One of the most impactful workshops for me was a workshop on advocacy at state level, working with legislatures throughout the year, as well as in January as legislation begins on the floor. It was a long workshop. There was a lot to absorb. We got an amazing binder full of information and some great links to some information about TVW, which I had no idea what it was, but it's TV Washington. And it's sort of like CNN for Washington State. And so, yeah, thank you. And see, this is how I learned so much about state politics. But if you really are, interested in a particular bill, that is a good resource because you can tap into the live meetings or there is also a website, and I can't remember the link right offhand, but I'm happy to find that so we could post it somewhere if that's appropriate. That will get you into a website that shares every state legislator, everything from their picture to their voting record, to what bills they have introduced into the session, where those bills are at, et cetera, et cetera. And it's really it just really drills down into the specifics of even how to participate in those meetings or in those pieces of legislature. So that was really informative for me, because I feel like I know quite a bit about local government, but it was really nice to learn a little bit more about how to advocate on a state level. So that was really important for me. One last tiny thing, some advocacy for the community center. Holiday House is happening. There's all kinds of information about that on Readiness to Learn's website. And the community center is the hub for that. I believe it was mentioned in the student report as well. The students come in and decorate and help make that a really beautiful, wonderful store for folks to shop in if they have that need. And so please take a look at that information, and there's all kinds of ways to give or share. And Southwoodby Elementary School clubs are going strong. So it's happening. I can speak specifically for Drama Club. Our kids are amazing and they have such a great time. We do a quick circle and then we get right to the acting because that's what they want to do. So lots of improv. It's amazing how well a third grader can become like an 87-year-old person really fast. That's kind of what we did last time. And it was really hilarious. So anyway, those are my thoughts for this month.
I'll go next. I also have some thoughts about the conference. I put them into some slides, and let me figure out how to share my screen. Oh, here it is. Excellent. Okay. Yeah, so we attended the Washington State School Directors Association Annual Conference. I attended a lot of sessions. I'm not going to be talking about all of them, but for folks who read the screen, if there's a topic of interest to you and you want to hear my thoughts on it, you can come find me or email me. In addition to the sessions, there was some informal networking with other school directors from across the state. And there were also vendors setting up booths, one of which is called HYA. They're a superintendent search firm, and they offered to come and give a presentation to us. This is not an endorsement of them, simply an opportunity for them to state their case to us as a search firm. There were also large gatherings where all of these school directors were in one room. Here's a shot of it. You can see this very large room, and oh, what is that on the screen there? Boards of distinction, and look at that. South Woodby School District was honored with a Board of Distinction Award for small enrollment districts. These are boards that have demonstrated dedication to improvement as a board and to best practices and board leadership. So I want to thank my colleagues and recognize that accomplishment. One of the keynotes was an educator named Erin Jones, and she had this really great quote that I love. I feel like it's very topical as we've been discussing professional communications, and she even had this cool gesture that went into it, and she's really good at like getting participation. She got everybody doing the hand motions, but it really stuck with me about how we can bring out the best in each other as we tackle problems where people might not agree, and we still have to work together on solving big problems. One of the talks that I went to that I thought was really interesting that was about principals. It's maybe hard to see it for folks on the Zoom, but we have our building leaders at the back of the room. And I guess I don't know if I realized what a critical role it is in the district The speaker made that argument that it is perhaps an effective principle. It's perhaps the highest return on investment for really enacting the vision of the district. The problem is that there's in some districts there's high turnover, and they can't stay in the role long enough to affect change. So the talk was really about reducing turnover and accelerating impact. I feel so blessed that we don't have that problem, that we have both effective building leaders and long tenured building leaders. And so I just want to thank you all for all your hard work. Yeah, please let the board know if there's anything that we can do to help accelerate the impact that you're having in your buildings. This is a napkin. Right now it's blank, but one talk I went to was about how to fit the entire presentation that Mr. Poolman gives about the budget, how to fit that on a paper napkin. And so it's certainly not going to be as thorough as Mr. Poolman's presentation. But the idea here is the talk was training directors on how to communicate the intricacies to the public. What follows is my attempt to do so. So it fits on the napkin, and it leaves out a lot of the nuance, but the ideas are that we get most of our funding from the state. A lot of that funding is for basic ed, which is much of teaching and learning is funded. Despite the McCleary decision, it's still currently underfunded by the state. And one of the reasons that the funding model doesn't represent reality, the reality of how many nurses are needed to keep students healthy during the day, and how many other educators and professionals are needed to run a district. For instance, speaking about our district, we're given funding for the average teacher, but our district's teachers are not average, they're above average. They've stayed in the profession so long that they have earned more salary because of their tenure. And so they're paid above average, but we only get revenue for average teachers. So we have to fill that gap somehow. There are state and federal dollars that must be spent on specific items. It would be like receiving a paycheck from your employer, but the dollars were written on them. This must be spent on groceries. This must be spent on electricity. And if you run out of the money that's spent on the specific things, you can't just move the money around. So some of the ways that we spend money, our hands are tied. And if money's from one of those programs shrinks or gets cut, we either have to cut that program or pay for it in a different way. And so hopefully this will go a little ways towards answering some of the questions and correcting a lot of the misconceptions that we hear. This is very, very complicated. And so I have a lot of compassion for community members who are misinformed because it's not their fault. This is an extremely complicated topic that I don't even fully understand. But I would like to help people understand it and bring them up and in instead of calling them misinformed. So hopefully this can help. And if other people want to try this, I know I've left a lot out and oversimplified. So there's more than one way to do this. I also went to a talk on governance models. There's a lot here. One thing I noticed is that of the about 200 or so districts in the state, only 22 have adopted a formal governance model. And of those 22, most have recently won a board of distinction. So there is perhaps some correlation with doing the work to adopt a model and a high functioning board. The presentation went through 3 of the common governance models. There is a new governance model that wasn't covered called empowered governance that potentially looks promising, but since it's new, there's very few case studies to say like, this is the type of districts where it works or it doesn't work. They're all very similar. They provide roles. What versus how is something we talk about a lot, in that a board decides what happens and then delegates to the superintendent to give them the freedom to decide how it should happen because they're the professional educator or educational leader. The main difference between the governance models is whether they focus on policies or goal setting. And then how the board holds the district accountable. Is it accountability through compliance with policy or accountability through progress on goals? I think this is an interesting topic, and I would recommend to the board to have a committee to study these governance models and either recommend one or recommend that it will not be necessary for the board to go through the process of adopting one. I would be happy to lead that committee. Here's an example of a strategic plan from Bellingham. What I like about it is it fits on a page. It's probably hard to see squished onto a slide, but a community member could hold this. They can see the mission, vision, and values of the district. They can see the goals of the district, which are board directed. That's the what. And then they can see the strategies that the superintendent has decided how those goals would be achieved. Now, we could certainly create this without a governance model, but the idea is that a governance model makes it easier to separate the what from the how and communicate it to the public. That's all I have. And so if there's any questions from those on the dais, I'd be happy to answer them.
I think at some point it would be great to have a committee look at the governance models. It feels to me like we're sort of in between a couple of them, but it certainly seems to me like a worthwhile endeavor to see if one of them, see if going one way or another would be valuable.
I will admit ignorance on how a board committee is formed, but I will discuss with you offline on the appropriate channel for doing so.
I just wanted to add one thing that Joe raised in case it was a surprise to anyone. So Dan has given his resignation. It was on the board's agenda tonight. We're recruiting to replace Dan, and I hope to have somebody in here in March or April to work with him. And then in a year and 6 months and 29 days, I am leaving. And so next school year around this time, the board will be engaged in recruiting. And so hence Joe's comment, it wasn't a surprise to me, but it may have seemed out of context for others.
Thank you. I'm almost positive I was not the first person to bring that up in an official board meeting. I think it's been brought up before, but it's true. Maybe not everybody heard that. So thank you for contextualizing that remark.
We've been talking about it for a year and a half now.
Yeah.
Or
True.
yeah.
But I
But
wanted to give
no, it's
Dan
good.
a
Yeah.
moment in the sun since he's
Yes.
actually the one going in June. And I really was trying to convince him not to, but I don't think he's going to listen.
I did notice you on that list and it made me very sad, Dan. Andrea or Marnie, do you want to?
Yeah, I really appreciate your very thorough presentation on the topic of the WASDA conference. Thank you very much. And I just wanted to add that I participated in a new offering from WASDA, one of their on-board sessions to give board members the skills they need to be successful in this role. And it was specifically about district finance and understanding and reading budgets. And because it was their first time presenting the course material, there was some feedback given to the instructors during the program. One of the exercises involved giving me a handout and letting me respond to it as though I had just gotten this handout from my district financial officer and was analyzing the material. And I basically looked at it and said, this is preposterous. And if I got this from Mr. Pullman, I would be horrified. And I would wonder what the hell had gone wrong with his projections because he's off by like 12 to 20% on some of these estimates here. And this is shocking and disturbing. And I would be very, very concerned. But here's what this number means. Here's what that number means. Here's why we don't have to worry about that one because those are pass-through funds, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, I was able to summarize what I would have heard from you about these numbers. And in 30 seconds or less, I was able to convince them that you should be teaching that course. So Dan, thank you for all that you've taught me, all that you've taught us, and hopefully all that you're going to be teaching your successor in this role.
So I I'm going to take a pivot on what I'm going to recap from the conference because I feel like people have captured the sessions well. But I just really wanted to acknowledge and notice a comment that I heard across our board throughout the conference, which is when we came to that conference, and I think this is my 5th or 6th one that I've gone to now, it was really clear that South Whidbey stands out. And we all noticed that. We noticed that Dr. Moshe, you are quite popular. And everybody knows who you are and everybody wants to come talk to you. And us passing the bond was huge. People were congratulating us from all over the state. Our student representatives are very well known. And it was really clear that even though we are small, we are mighty. And we are acknowledged throughout the state for the work that we do here. And people acknowledge each and every one of us in our own, in our own lanes. And it was really nice for that, just to kind of see that. And because I think sometimes we get pretty isolated here on our little island. And I just really wanted to acknowledge that. In particular, how we could never find Joe because Joe was always off chatting with somebody.
And often bringing them over to us to introduce them. Yes. That's definitely something I noticed over the last couple of years, but in particular this year, Andrea, is they were looking at South Whidbey as, how did we pass a bond? PASCO in February.
Well, yeah.
So 2, yeah. 2 of 16 or 17 this year so far. What we're doing with student reps and how our student reps have helped shape what WASDA is doing with student reps. Our curriculum search profiles, how we bring curriculum on board, a couple of different areas as well.
Our financial standing, thanks
Yes,
to Mr.
absolutely.
Pullman.
Yes. That people are seeking out South Whidbey school board members to ask how we're doing things. And that's, I mean, selfishly, that's very gratifying to hear that people like how we're doing things. But it's also fantastic to then be able to say, how are you doing this and how can we learn from that? And I think that's the most valuable thing for me at these conferences is talking to other board members and finding out how they're solving the same problems we're having or how they're not managing to solve it. I also went to the Strategic Advocacy Academy that Ann talked about and deciphering district budgets like Marnie talked about. And yes, Dan, you could have and should have taught that. I almost could have taught that based on the 4 years of learning that I have from you. And that says more about you than it does about me. Listening to student voices and others, the curriculum adoption process, transforming the strategic planning process, parliamentary procedure, which is why I was able to get through those double amendments so well, and involving community in a superintendent search. In particular, I learned a lot about that, how to, both that and the strategic planning process, talking about how to get goals and values and vision from your community, which includes students and staff and parents and people who have no specific tie to the school, how to get that for both the superintendent search and strategic planning. And those are things we're going to be doing in our terms, those of us who are just reelected. And so I'm looking forward to using some of that I learned. The WASDA legislative priorities that I talked about 2 months ago now, a month and a half, all of the things that were on our list, except one, made it onto their list. That one was student voice. And that was because these are legislative priorities. I actually talked to someone at WASDA about this because I'm like, where's the student voice thing? And she pointed out quite correctly that these are legislative priorities and legislators don't need to tell us how to get student voice on boards. We need to tell each other how to do that. And we need to listen to you on how to do that. But all of the other ones that we had talked about were on their final list, including providing ample, equitable, and stable public education, which includes funding programs and staff based on student needs, career and technical education, transition to kindergarten, close regionalization factor gaps, eliminate different access to levy and levy equalization funding, and then advanced special education with lots of details within that, build safe and healthy schools, which includes working on the simple majority or something near that for passing bonds, and transport and feed students. So everything that we elevated made their list, which suggests to me that a lot of other people elevated those things too. And the last thing on my list was 3 of us are re-swearing in December, or swearing in for our second term in December. I had a question for the board as to whether we would like to make it anytime one person swears in, everyone does again, just to remind us of our oaths. And that's just something we can think about, and you can give me your opinion offline. Just something to bring us together also and reaffirm why we're up here every other year. Okay, any other comments or questions from folks up here?
I have a comment. I really appreciate the update about legislative priorities, and I would love to offer a legislative update at each meeting between now and the end of the short session, since we're coming into the season where this all starts to heat up. So if it would be welcome on the agenda in future meetings, I'd like to provide that brief update in addition to the legislative updates that come from other board members, if any.
Done. Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.